The battlefield was not where she had expected to meet him. Smoke curled between the ruined walls, and the crackle of distant plasma fire echoed in the air. Her breathing was steady, her gloved finger resting against the trigger. She had hunted soldiers before, but this human was different. He moved with purpose, his shadow gliding across the rubble. When he finally stepped into view, she did not hesitate. The shot lit the air, a bright streak cutting through the haze. Yet even before the sound faded, he was already moving toward her with terrifying speed. Her golden eyes narrowed, the heat of frustration flaring in her chest. No one closed the distance like that, not in the open, not without fear. Her kind had faced humans in skirmishes before, but this was something else. She fired again, the bolt missing by inches as he swerved behind a collapsed wall. Dust rose in the air, blurring her vision. She adjusted her aim, tracking the slightest movement. But his shadow disappeared completely. She scanned the ruins, every sense alert. Then she heard it, a single boot scraping stone behind her. She turned sharply, her arms snapping up, but his hand caught her wrist before she could fire. The sudden contact sent a jolt through her muscles, and she could feel the strength in his grip. They locked eyes for a moment, his expression unreadable but his intent clear. He was not there to kill her, at least not yet. She shoved against him, trying to pull free, but he stepped closer, forcing her back against the cold surface of a wall. The barrel of his sidearm rested lightly against her armor, not firing, just waiting. Her breathing quickened as she weighed her options. She had never been this close to an enemy soldier without ending the fight in the first second. The human's gaze did not waver, and she noticed a faint scar across his cheek, a mark of battle survived. In his eyes there was no panic, only an unshakable determination. She felt her heartbeat loud in her ears, each second stretching. She knew if she moved wrong, the fight would be over in a flash. Yet, something about the stillness between them felt more dangerous than the gun itself. The silence broke when a distant explosion shook the ground. A shower of dust fell from above, forcing them both to glance upward for a heartbeat. That was all the time she needed. She twisted her wrist sharply, breaking his grip, and slid away into the shadows. The human followed without hesitation, his boots pounding against the broken floor. She darted through the debris, weaving between walls and shattered beams. She could hear his breathing now, closer than she wanted, his footsteps matching her every turn. She had hunted, and now she was the hunted. The path narrowed ahead, a single corridor lined with flickering lights. She sprinted through it, knowing it would give her only a few seconds to reload. Her hands moved quickly, sliding a fresh power cell into her weapon. But before the charge was complete, she felt the vibration of approaching footsteps again. She swung around, half ready to fire. But the human was already there, filling the space with his presence. His weapon was still down, but the tension in his stance said he could raise it in less than a breath. They stood only a meter apart now. Her instincts screamed to shoot, yet her mind hesitated. The way he moved, the speed with which he had crossed. The battlefield, the precision in every motion. None of it fit the stories told of human soldiers. She realized she could not predict what he would do next. For a moment, neither of them moved, the only sound the faint hum of her half-charged weapon. His eyes studied her, not with rage, but with an intensity that made her feel exposed. She had never felt this kind of pressure in a fight, and it unsettled her. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and sharp, demanding to know why he had not fired. His answer came without pause, his tone steady, saying she was worth more alive than dead. The words unsettled her more than any weapon could. She gripped her blaster tighter, unsure whether to trust or to end the standoff in one final shot. Somewhere deep down, a new question formed in her mind, one she had never asked about any enemy before. And that question, she realized, might be far more dangerous than the man standing before her. The ruins outside the corridor were littered with debris. Every step crunched against broken glass and twisted metal. She moved quickly, keeping her weapon raised while her eyes scanned every shadow. The human's presence was like a weight pressing against her back, though she could not see him now. The air felt heavier, as if the very battlefield was watching them both. A flicker of movement made her stop. A shape passed behind the fallen beam, vanishing into the smoke. She tightened her grip on her weapon and approached slowly. Each step was deliberate, her senses locked on the sound of shifting rubble. Then she caught sight of him again. He was standing in the open, not aiming. His weapon, just watching her with that same unshakable gaze. For a moment she wondered if this was some kind of trap. Her people's war with humans had been going for years. She had been trained to expect brutality, to see them as relentless predators. Yet this man did not strike when he had the chance. Instead, he kept closing the distance as if daring her to react. She steadied her breathing, adjusting her aim, but something in his stance made her hesitate. It was not fear she saw in him, nor arrogance. It was something else entirely, and it unsettled her. The wind shifted, carrying with it the smell of burning fuel. Somewhere in the distance, a transport exploded, sending a tremor through the ground. Both of them turned toward the sound for a brief second. When her eyes returned to him, he was already moving again. He advanced without breaking eye contact, his steps silent and controlled. She backed away, forcing herself to maintain aim as her pulse quickened. The space between them was closing again, and she felt her muscles tense. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and calm. He told her she would not win this fight if she wasted time on fear. The words caught her off guard. No human had ever spoken to her in the middle of a battle, except to threaten or demand surrender. She tightened her jaw, refusing to answer. But his gaze searched her face as if looking for something beneath her anger. She hated the way it made her feel exposed, as though he already knew her next move. Her instincts screamed to fire, to end this before he could get closer. But her mind stalled at the thought. Something about this man defied her expectations, and hesitation was dangerous. She had been taught that in war, hesitation meant death. Yet here she was, lowering her weapon slightly, unsure whether to shoot or listen. Her heart pounded in her chest, every beat reminding her how close he now stood. One wrong move and it would all be over. Suddenly, the sound of approaching boots broke the standoff. A squad of her own soldiers emerged from the smoke, their weapons aimed at the human. They shouted orders for him to drop his weapon, but he did not move. His eyes flicked toward them for only a moment before returning to her. There was a strange calm in his expression, as though he had already considered this outcome. She raised her hand to signal her soldiers, but her mind was at war with itself. The squad's leader demanded her to step aside so they could finish him. She knew the logical choice was to let them. Yet something inside her resisted. If they killed him now, the questions burning in her mind would never be answered. She found herself stepping between him and the squad, her blaster still in hand but aimed at the ground. Her soldiers froze, confusion etched on their faces. She told them he was her prisoner, and no one would touch him without her order. The human's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but she caught it. A slight narrowing of the eyes, a faint tightening of the jaw. He did not thank her, nor did he relax his stance. Instead, he studied her as though reassessing the entire situation. She realized she had just made a decision that could alter more than just the outcome of this battle. And as the smoke curled higher into the air, she knew there was no turning back from what she had done. The squad reluctantly obeyed her command, lowering their weapons but keeping their eyes fixed on the human. Their confusion was clear, yet none dared question her directly. She gave a short order for them to secure the perimeter, using the excuse that more enemies might be approaching. In truth, she simply needed them out of the way. She could not interrogate this human with her soldiers watching every move. Once the others dispersed, she stepped closer to him. The air between them was tense, heavy with unspoken thoughts. She kept her weapon low but ready, aware that he could act without warning. His eyes followed her carefully, not out of fear, but with the precision of someone assessing every possible outcome. She demanded to know his purpose here, far from his own lines. He did not answer immediately, only tilting his head slightly, as though measuring the weight of his words before speaking. He finally said he was not here on orders. The claim made her frown. Every human soldier she had ever encountered fought under strict command. The idea of one moving alone into hostile territory was reckless, yet here he stood. She asked why she should believe him. His answer was simple. Believing him or not would not change what was coming. The certainty in his voice made her chest tighten. She was trained to read lies, but this did not feel like one. The ground trembled under a sudden shockwave, and both of them turned toward the distant horizon. A plume of black smoke spiraled into the sky, followed by the faint echo of sirens. She recognized the sound immediately. It was not one of their systems. It was human technology, signaling some kind of breach. Her instincts told her to regroup with her forces, but her curiosity about him anchored her in place. She needed to know if this was connected to him. Before she could speak again, he stepped forward. The movement was smooth, not aggressive, yet it made her pulse jump. He said the blast meant their lines had already been penetrated, and that staying here would seal her fate. His voice carried no triumph, only fact. She found herself caught between disbelief and the strange pull of his certainty. It was as if he saw the battlefield through a lens she could not access. Her fingers flexed against her weapon, unsure whether to aim or to listen. She asked why he would warn her if they were enemies. His response was quiet, but sharp. Not all battles were fought for the same reasons. That answer rattled her more than she expected. In her world, there was only one reason to fight: loyalty to the Empire. Yet he spoke as though there were choices beyond that, paths unseen. She tried to hold on to her training, to the clear lines between enemy and ally. But his words blurred those lines like smoke in the wind. The rumble of engines reached them, growing louder with each passing second. She knew their patrol vehicles were still far from this sector, which meant only one thing: human reinforcements. Her squad was scattered, unprepared for an ambush. She glanced at him, expecting to see the smugness of a soldier who had outmaneuvered his opponent. Instead, she saw a quiet resolve. He said she had two options: fight and die here, or move with him and learn why he had come. The way he said it left no room for doubt in his belief. Her mind raced. She had never considered walking with an enemy willingly. Yet the thought of facing an unknown strike without knowing what was truly happening felt like stepping blind into fire. Against every rule she had ever followed, she gave a small nod. His eyes flickered, not in victory, but in acknowledgement. Without another word, he turned and began moving toward the shadowed ruins beyond the street. She hesitated for only a moment before following him into the darkness. As they moved deeper into the war-torn district, the noise of the battlefield faded into an uneasy silence. Her senses stayed alert, scanning every alley and rooftop. He walked with a pace that was neither rushed nor careless, as though he knew exactly where he was going. She realized she had entered a space where every choice could be fatal, yet for reasons she could not name, she felt drawn to see where this path would lead. The war was still raging around them, but here, in this strange moment, it felt as if they had stepped into a different battle entirely. They moved through the ruins in silence, their footsteps crunching against shattered stone and twisted metal. The buildings leaned at strange angles, their frames torn apart by earlier bombardments. Every so often, she glanced back, scanning for movement in the haze. The war had taught her that even a moment's distraction could turn fatal. Yet part of her attention stayed fixed on the man walking ahead. His presence was steady, almost deliberate, as though he already knew the safest path through the chaos. He paused at a collapsed doorway, raising a hand to signal her to stop. She froze, her weapon lifted slightly, her ears tuned to the faintest sound. The air smelled faintly of oil and burned fabric, and the dust hung thick in the narrow passage. Without a word, he crouched and examined the ground. She realized he was looking at footprints, fresh ones, leading away from the city's main streets. Whoever had passed here had done so recently, and they were not careful about hiding their trail. When he rose again, his eyes flicked toward her. He said they were not alone in this sector. The words carried a weight that tightened her chest. She asked if they were his soldiers, and he shook his head. Whoever it was, they were dangerous to both of them. She found herself studying his face for signs of deceit, but his expression remained focused and calm. If he was lying, he hid it well, far better than any soldier she had faced before. They continued moving, weaving through the skeletal remains of what had once been a marketplace. Broken stalls leaned against each other, their faded banners hanging in strips. The silence here felt unnatural, as though the city itself was holding its breath. Her instincts warned her that danger was close. She caught herself glancing at the human more often, as though his confidence might offer some measure of protection. The thought irritated her, yet she could not ignore it. He led her into a narrow alley, the walls close enough that they could. Both touched them with outstretched arms. The shadows swallowed most of the light, leaving only the occasional glint from broken glass. Halfway through, he stopped again. This time she saw why. Ahead in the dim glow, two figures moved, their outlines sharp against the backdrop. They carried weapons unlike anything she had seen in the war, their design crude, yet somehow more lethal. She could tell instantly they were not from either side of the conflict. The human whispered that they were scavengers, a breed that thrived in war zones by killing anyone they encountered. His tone held no fear, only a certainty born from experience. She asked if they would pass without noticing, and he shook his head. These men never passed up prey. He gestured for her to stay behind. As he stepped forward, she gripped her weapon tighter, torn between letting him handle it and joining the fight. The decision was made for her when one of the scavengers spotted them. The alley erupted into motion. One scavenger raised his rifle, but before he could fire, the human closed the gap with a speed that stunned her. His movements were precise, every strike efficient and brutal. She fired at the second scavenger, her shot hitting center mass. The man crumpled without a sound. The fight ended as quickly as it had begun. She found herself staring at him, trying to understand how a soldier trained for war could also fight like a predator born to this kind of chaos. He said nothing as he checked the scavenger's weapons and took a small device from one of their belts. She asked what it was, but he only said it was important and that they needed to keep moving. The weight in his voice told her he was not exaggerating. She debated pressing him for more information, but a distant explosion cut the thought short. The sound rolled through the city, shaking loose fragments from the damaged walls around them. The war was moving closer again. They left the alley and stepped into another open street. Here, the destruction was even worse, the ground scarred by deep craters and the air thick with ash. She felt the sting of grit against her cheeks as the wind picked up. The human kept walking, never glancing back to see if she followed. She realized she was matching his pace without thinking, her steps falling into rhythm with his. In the distance, the faint outline of a tower rose against the smoke. Something about the way he looked at it told her their destination was closer than she thought. The tower loomed larger as they drew closer, its steel frame scarred by years of neglect and fresh battle damage. Twisted support beams jutted from its sides like broken bones, and the air around it shimmered with heat from distant fires. She kept her weapon ready, eyes darting between the shadows. The human moved with the same steady confidence he had shown from the start, but now there was a hint of urgency in his pace. They reached the base of the tower where a massive access door hung open on one hinge. The metal groaned softly in the wind, the sound carrying far in the stillness. She stepped through first, scanning the dim interior. Dust floated in the shafts of sunlight that slipped through cracks in the roof. The place felt abandoned, yet the faint hum of machinery suggested otherwise. He followed her in, his gaze moving across every corner like a man counting threats before they revealed themselves. The ground floor was littered with crates, scattered tools, and the remnants of old equipment. Some of it bore the markings of her people's supply lines, but others were unmistakably human in origin. She crouched near one crate, brushing away the dust to reveal a faded emblem. Before she could question it, he spoke, saying both sides had used this tower as a relay station in different eras of the war. His voice was steady, but there was a weight behind it, as if the truth carried more danger than the building itself. A sudden clang echoed from the upper level, sharp and deliberate. They both froze, eyes lifting toward the rusted staircase that spiraled into shadow. He raised a finger to his lips and moved toward the stairs, his steps quiet despite the debris. She followed close behind, her blaster held low but ready. The air grew colder as they ascended, the light fading with each step. Somewhere above, the sound of boots on metal grated against the silence. Whoever was up there was not trying to hide. They emerged into a large control room with shattered windows and consoles half buried under dust. 3 figures stood near the far wall, their faces hidden beneath helmets. Their armor was mismatched, cobbled together from different factions. One of them held a small device, identical to the one the human had taken from the scavenger earlier. Her breath tightened. This was no coincidence. She realized now that he had led them here for a reason. The question was whether that reason aligned with her survival. The human stepped forward and called out to the figures. His tone was calm but carried authority. They turned slowly, revealing weapons strapped across their backs. The one in the middle spoke first, accusing him of being late. She caught the flicker of recognition in his expression before it vanished. She did not know whether to raise her weapon or hold her ground. His next words were quiet, but firm, telling them the plan had changed. That single sentence made the 3 figures tense instantly. One of them moved to draw a blade, but the human's sidearm was already aimed at the floor near his feet. He fired a single shot into the metal, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. It was not a threat in the usual sense. It was a warning that needed no further explanation. The other 2 hesitated, their hands hovering near their weapons. She watched in silence, trying to piece together what kind of game he was playing. If these people were allies, they did not act like it. He stepped closer to the leader and demanded the device in his hand. After a moment of stillness, the figure tossed it to him with visible reluctance. The human caught it without breaking eye contact. She noticed the faintest smirk on his lips before he turned away. Without another word to the group, he walked toward the staircase. She followed, glancing back once to see the 3 still frozen in place, their tension unbroken. The air in the room felt heavier than when they had entered. Back on the ground floor, she finally asked him what the device was. He said it was the key to ending something neither of their armies understood. That answer only deepened her confusion. She wanted to demand more, to strip away the mystery, but the sound of distant gunfire pulled both their attention back to the streets outside. The war had not paused for whatever was happening between them. And as they stepped out of the tower's shadow, she felt the sense that her next choice would matter more than any order she had ever followed. The streets outside the tower were louder now, echoing with the clash of gunfire and the distant rumble of armored vehicles. Smoke drifted through the air in long twisting trails, carrying the smell of burnt fuel and scorched metal. She scanned the rooftops for movement while keeping pace with the human. His focus never wavered from the path ahead, and the device he had taken was now clipped to his belt like it was the most important thing in the war. They moved quickly through a side street, lined with the remains of collapsed housing blocks. Her boots crunched over shattered glass and bits of ceramic tile. Somewhere nearby, a building groaned under the strain of fire damage before giving way in a muffled collapse. The human didn't slow, weaving between the wreckage with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times. She was starting to realize that every place he led her had purpose, even if she didn't yet see it. A sudden burst of static crackled from a comm unit lying half buried in the rubble. She crouched to pick it up, but he shook his head sharply and told her to leave it. His voice was low, urgent, warning her that enemy patrols often planted decoys like this to track scavengers or survivors. She left it where it was, but the way he read the battlefield without even stopping to think made her uneasy. It wasn't just soldier's instinct, it was something sharper, something almost surgical. As they turned a corner, the sharp hiss of plasma fire cut the air just ahead. She dropped into cover beside a wall, and he mirrored the movement without needing to be told. Across the street, 3 of her people were pinned down behind a barricade, their armor scorched and their voices raised in panicked shouts. The attackers were positioned on the high ground, their shots raining down with mechanical precision. She knew those patterns. It was human special forces fire discipline. She glanced at him, expecting him to take advantage of the situation, but instead, he studied the scene before speaking. He told her the squad in trouble wouldn't last 2 more minutes unless someone flanked the shooters. She hesitated, unsure why he would help her soldiers at all. He simply said survival mattered more than uniforms right now. The certainty in his voice was infuriating, but also strangely convincing. Against her better judgment, she nodded and prepared to move. They split without speaking. She circled wide along the debris-strewn alley while he moved low and fast toward the far side. The high ground was a broken balcony that overlooked the street, and from below she could already see the flashes of enemy muzzles. She waited for his signal, a sharp glint from the reflection of his sidearm, before rising from cover and firing. Her shot struck true, forcing the attackers to turn toward her. That was when he struck from behind, fast and precise. The fight was over. In seconds, the Special Forces soldiers were down, their weapons scattered across the balcony. She looked over to see him already checking the bodies for supplies. Her soldiers below scrambled to their feet, clearly shocked to see her alive, and even more so to see a human standing beside her without a weapon pointed at his head. She ordered them to regroup and push toward the safe sector, telling them she would follow. The relief in their faces was clear, but so was the confusion. Once they were gone, she asked him why he had risked himself for them. He didn't answer. Right away, only looked toward the horizon where the smoke was thickest. Finally, he said that the device on his belt could only do what it was meant to if both their armies stopped tearing each other apart long enough to see the truth. The way he said it left no room for doubt that he believed it. She hated that a part of her wanted to believe it too. They continued deeper into the ruins, heading toward the industrial quarter. The buildings here were larger, their skeletal frames jutting high into the darkened sky. Somewhere within those shadows, she knew, lay both the answers she sought and the danger that could kill them before they found them. Yet for the first time since the war began, she wasn't entirely sure which. She feared more. The battle still raged beyond the horizon, but here, walking beside this man, it felt like a different kind of war entirely. The industrial quarter loomed ahead, its skeletal towers reaching into the smoke-filled sky. Broken walkways hung between buildings like the bones of some dead giant. The wind carried the sound of metal groaning under its own weight, and the ground was littered with shards of glass and fragments of machinery. She kept her weapon close, scanning every shadow, while the human moved with purpose toward a structure at the heart of the district, It was an old power distribution hub, the kind her people had abandoned decades ago. The walls were streaked with rust, and the massive doors at its entrance hung half open. A faint, rhythmic hum pulsed from within, steady and deliberate. He slowed as they approached, his hand brushing against the device on his belt. She could tell this was the place he had been aiming for all along. The realization made her tighten her grip on her blaster as she stepped in after him. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of oil and ozone. Rows of silent machines stretched into the shadows, their control panels covered in dust. In the center of the room, a single console still glowed faintly, its screens flickering with streams of alien symbols. He crossed the floor without hesitation and began working the controls. She stayed back, watching him with narrowed eyes. She had seen humans operate their own machines, but the way he handled this equipment, technology from her people's history, was something different. She demanded to know how he could read the interface. Without looking up, he answered that the device he carried was built using designs stolen from this very place. His voice was calm, almost casual, but the truth behind the words made her chest tighten. She asked if this was some elaborate sabotage, and for the first time since they met, he turned fully toward her. His gaze was sharp, and his answer was simple. Sabotage would mean nothing if the war itself didn't end. Before she could respond, the sound of boots striking metal echoed through the chamber. She shifted her aim toward the doorway just as a squad entered, their armor a mismatched combination of both human and alien designs. They carried heavy rifles and moved like professionals, fanning out to block every exit. The leader's visor reflected the dim light as he demanded the device. She glanced at the human, expecting him to prepare for a fight, but instead he stepped forward slowly. He told them the device was no longer theirs to claim. His tone was level, but every word was edged with finality. The squad tensed, weapons rising slightly. She could feel the pressure in the room building, the moment before violence where every heartbeat felt like an eternity. She took a step closer to his side, her own weapon raised. The leader of the squad warned them that refusal would mean their deaths. The human's reply was that death would come to all if the device was used by the wrong hands. The first shot rang out without warning. She dropped into cover behind a console, returning fire as the human moved with precise efficiency. The fight was fierce but short, the echo of gunfire fading quickly into the humming of the machines. The squad lay defeated, their weapons scattered across the floor. She found herself breathing hard, adrenaline still burning in her veins. He retrieved the device, now dented but intact, and turned back to the console without a word. She demanded to know what he planned to do. His fingers moved over the controls as he explained that the device was a failsafe, a way to shut down every automated weapon system on both sides for long enough to force a ceasefire. The concept was so far outside her understanding of war that she could barely process it. For her entire life, victory had only meant crushing the enemy. Yet here was someone trying to end the fight by making both sides equally powerless. Her voice was sharp when she asked if he really thought this would work. He didn't look up, only said that sometimes survival was the only victory worth having. Something in his tone struck her, not as weakness, but as conviction. For the first time, she felt the possibility that everything she had been taught about the enemy might not be the whole truth. And as the console's glow brightened, she knew whatever happened next would decide not just their fates, but the fate of the war itself. The console's glow shifted from pale blue to a deep pulsing gold. Symbols cascaded down its display in rapid succession, and the air in the room seemed to vibrate with the energy building inside the device. She kept her weapon in hand, eyes moving between the human and the entrance, knowing that if anyone else came through those doors, the fight would start all over again. He worked with unwavering focus, every keystroke deliberate, as if each second mattered more than the last. A low hum began to fill the chamber, spreading through the floor beneath her boots. She recognized the sound from training archives, a signal resonance strong enough to reach orbital systems. Her chest tightened at the realization. This was not just a localized shutdown. He was about to cut the heart out of the war itself. She stepped closer, her voice low as she asked if he understood what this would mean for both their people. He simply nodded once, his jaw set with unshakable resolve. The moment the final sequence entered, the device released a burst of light that washed across the room in a silent wave. It passed through her without pain, only leaving a strange tingling in her fingertips. Somewhere far above, the sound of weapons fire abruptly stopped. Even the distant rumble of artillery faded into an unnatural silence. For the first time since the war began, there was nothing but the quiet hum of the old power hub. The stillness was almost overwhelming. She stared at him, struggling to understand what he had just done. Every automated system on both sides was offline now: orbital cannons, drone swarms, defense grids. The war had not ended, but the deadliest tools had been ripped from its hands. He met her gaze and said the choice of what happened next now belonged to those still alive, not to machines or commanders far from the battlefield. His words settled heavily in the air, undeniable in their truth. The silence did not last. A voice echoed from the doorway, sharp and furious. A group of her own officers stood there, weapons drawn, eyes fixed on the human. They demanded his execution for sabotaging their military. She could feel the weight of their expectation pressing down on her. By all laws of her people, she should give the order. Yet as she looked at him, she remembered every moment since their first encounter: his speed, his restraint, his refusal to kill when he could have. Her pulse pounded as she stepped between him and the officers. The shift in their expressions was immediate: shock, then disbelief, then anger. She told them the war had been stolen from them long before this moment, that they were fighting for leaders who cared nothing for the lives being lost. The room fell still except for the hum of the console. Her words were dangerous, perhaps even treason, but she no longer cared. Some truths were worth speaking, no matter the cost. The lead officer raised his weapon, but she met his aim without flinching. A long moment passed where no one moved. Finally, one of the younger soldiers lowered his rifle, uncertainty written across his face. The others hesitated, the tension twisting tighter until it finally snapped. One by one, they backed away from the doorway, their loyalty to old orders breaking under the weight of her defiance. The lead officer's glare promised this was not over, but for now, the human was safe. When they were alone again, he asked if she understood the risk she had taken. She answered that some battles were worth losing if it meant winning something greater. His expression softened for the first time, and she realized he had been carrying his own doubts until now. They stood together in the dim light of the hub, the weight of the war pressing down on them both. Somewhere beyond the walls, soldiers from both sides were beginning to realize their weapons no longer worked. They left the hub in silence, stepping back into a city that felt eerily different without the constant roar of battle. Smoke still hung in the air, and the scars of war remained on every street, but the deadly rhythm of combat had stopped. Whether that peace would hold was uncertain. Yet for the first time, she felt there was a path forward that did not end in endless bloodshed. And as they walked side by side through the ruins, she knew this was the moment her war truly ended.